Hey, Nigel, can you hear me? Nigel?
I think I can get...
This is unbelievable. Nigel, can you hear me? Nigel, can you hear me?
Uh-oh.
Nigel? Nigel, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. Fantastic. Let's try this again. Okay, we're live.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yay! So it's working. Okay, good.
What did you do?
I was on a 2-channel and I switched over to a 1-channel, but it was the exact same the other day. So that's all right. Now we're on. Let's talk about the trip. Let's talk about the trip and figure out what we're going to do there. We're having a couple of technical difficulties here, but it's okay. Now we can both hear each other. That's fantastic. Good. Okay, so let's talk about the trip. I think we lost a lot of people that were watching live, but that's okay. We'll record this and play it later. I want to make sure that everybody that is here gets to see it, even if they're seeing it later. So let's go ahead and talk about our trip. First, let's introduce you and a little bit about yourself, why you're here, why we're talking to you, and what's going to happen with the trip. So I'm going to let you talk for a little bit. Just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into why we're going to South Africa, what we're going to do while we're down there. We'll pull up the scene, and then they won't really be able to see us, but they'll be able to see exactly what you and I are doing and what we're talking about. So go ahead. I'll let you take the mic.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Michael. I'm Nigel February. I've been doing martial arts for almost 30 years. I'm the founder of the Piper System, which is the first criminal endemic martial art, and South Africa's first official martial art. I created that 22 years ago after studying the criminals and, of course, endemic and criminal cultures. So
okay, are you there, Nigel?
yeah.
Okay,
I think we just for a moment ago.
Yeah, we had a moment's lapse because I think it switched over to a different Wi-Fi. So go ahead, continue talking.
Okay, cool. So just keep it nice and brief. I've created the Piper System, which is a criminal endemic-based martial art, which actually mimics the bad guy and how they use the knife in South Africa, which is very unique. And before you could develop countermeasures, I needed to study the criminal up close. So I wanted to understand exactly how to defend or defeat a knife attack. So that's basically the beginning of my research, but it's been around for 22 years. And one of I think the major things that has been coming up over the past 22 years was that people that wanted to study the Piper System felt that they needed to come to South Africa or to come to Africa to actually study the culture that gave birth to this unique killing method, if you want to put it that way, because the place where I live, Cape Town, is now considered the third most violent city in the world. And people also need to remember that Cape Town or South Africa is a third world country. So when it comes to violence through poverty, third world countries, rank among the highest in the world when it comes to violence. So people need to understand the different concepts of violence. You get violence through martial arts, sports, through war, and then through poverty. So this is generally how we rank violence in the world. A desperate and hungry person will be a lot more violent and will present violence to you in a very different way as two guys stick fighting as part of a tribal or an honor-based system. So if the two of us are sparring, we are martial artists, so there's some code involved. But somebody that wants to cut you because they're hungry, presents a different animal. So we needed to look at creating some kind of a study in that direction. Which we don't currently have. So, yeah, and I think that this is where we are right now.
Okay, awesome. We're going to take a brief moment and come right back. You won't be able to hear us. We're going to show you a little bit about Shockwave Defense's history and who Shockwave Defense is, why we're going down to South Africa, and why it's so important for us as a group to take a trip to South Africa and really understand the ins and outs of what's going on down there and how it's working. So be patient with us. We'll jump right back and give you a brief overview here. And hopefully our video will work. We're having a ton of, this is the first time we're using this software, so we for some reason seem to keep having issues with it working. But we're going to figure out why it's not working, and let me throw this in real quick. So we're going to insert this video real quick, choose a file.
The rich lineage of Shockwave defense dates back to the 20s, starting with Samuel K. Johnson. Mr. Johnson had black belts in judo and jiu-jitsu, from which he developed his own combination of tactics. He taught these tactics to his first and only student, his son, Steve Johnson. Steve Johnson began his training in the martial arts at the age of 12, and his dad helped him develop his own style of defense, as well as building his first school. Steve continued to train in the arts under several well-known martial artists, such as Yip Chun, and became most well-known for his training under martial arts legend and movie star, the late, incredible Bruce Lee. 1967 to 1969. His training developed into a combination of what he learned from his father and his instructors. This new interpretation he coined Jin Sun Do Gung Fu, or Johnson's way of hard work. Starting the arts at the age of 2, Master Michael C. Johnson continues to grow his knowledge and career in combatives. He opened his first school in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 2002, where he combined experiences of life conviction, behavioral psychology, a degree in criminology, and multiple black belt rankings into his own interpretation of defense. Known as BELLICUSOLOGY, or the study of militant, martial, and warfare ways. He holds a BA in criminology from the University of New Mexico and is the honorary squadron commander for the 512th Rescue Squadron at Kirtland Air Force Base. Michael's background includes bodyguard work for celebrities such as Exhibit and teaching notoriety as the primary DMS combatives instructor for the state of Florida's Department of Corrections and their special teams units. His instruction has reached over 19,000 officers in their departments, and he's trained multiple officers from other agencies nationwide. Johnson is a certified NRA firearms instructor and a professional lecturer through the state of New Mexico's Department of Public Safety. He teaches domestically and abroad, including Taiwan, Dubai, and the Yokota Air Force Base in Tokyo, Japan, where he trained the 459th how to defend themselves and their aircraft should a hostile actor try to take over the aircraft. In the summer of 2018, Johnson traveled to South Africa and worked with the South African Metro Police Tactical Response Unit in defense against hostile encounters. His tried and tested skills have held up against the most fierce of testing grounds, including overpressure combat, where he has over 55 full-contact improvised tool fights. He continues to train the public, as well as law enforcement and military personnel, how to function effectively in high-risk and high-stress resistant environments. Additionally, Johnson and his team help coordinate film scenarios for their international strategic partners, Laser Shot Simulations. These videos offer judgmental training scenarios that aid first responders in life-saving skills and how to effectively deal with violent and non-violent situations, including how to cope with shoot, no-shoot scenarios. His hobbies include snowboarding, full-contact stick fighting, high-speed sports, traveling, operating high-speed vehicles, and spending time with his daughters.
Welcome back. Okay, so Nigel, tell us a little bit about what's going to be happening in South Africa why we're going to South Africa. We had a couple of technical difficulties. Those of you that hung out with us, thank you so much. We're going to talk about everything. We talked a little bit about Nigel for those of you that are just joining us and his background and why the system was so potent. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take a dive into, no pun intended, we're going to take a dive into the, Nigel, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. We're going to take, I'm like, no! We're going to take a dive into the trip here and what we're actually going to do. So let's talk about the shark dive, Nigel. What's going to happen in the shark dive?
Well, first of all, you're the expert on sharks, and you know I'm not a big fan of the ocean. After your little experience when you arrived, we had 2 killer whales that kind of chased all the sharks to Australia. So that was a kind of a nervous 3 days. You know, when because I mean that thing is quite unpredictable, but. The shark dive is going to be quite interesting because we are trying to. I want to take you up to Shark Alley, which is in Kleinby. I'm not sure if you were at that spot, but it has 2 islands, one large island and a tiny one called Seal Island, and we have about 50 feet that separates the 2 islands, and that little alley, you know, it's called Shark Alley, so that's going to be cool because you'll see great whites actually breach. So, yeah, flying sharks, yeah, that's a good idea.
Let's talk about the cultural stick fighting experience. What's going to happen?
Yeah, that's on dry line. Yeah.
Okay.
So, my idea is to look at the different cultures, stick fighting cultures we have in Cape Town at the moment. Cape Town isn't the Zulu environment. It although it contains very small Zulu community, Natal or the east coast of South Africa. That is where the Zulus have they're from, and they're still there after like 200-300 years. But they are different, what we call First Nation tribes. In other words, the original tribes of Africa. Mm-hmm. The very first tribes to walk Africa is actually found in Cape Town,
right,
or Southern Africa. So those are called the Khoi and the San, and we'll see some Sotho and some Xhosa tribes. The Xhosa, that's the language that was spoken in Black Panther, and that's the third most. I think that's one of the third official languages. It's like English, Afrikaans, Xhosa, Zulu, and then the rest. So. My idea would be to have stick fighting and from a cultural perspective, where you could face different tribes.
But we should point out that people don't have to stick fight if they don't want to. Like, part of our instructor process that we do in order to become a guardian at Shockwave Defense is you have to be labeled a warrior on different continents. So you got to go to different continents and fight their warriors and be awarded a warrior under their tribal name. But for those of you that are coming, if you're like, dude, I don't want to get hit with a stick, we totally get it. Not many people do want to get hit with a stick. That takes a very unique mindset. Yeah. So you can watch everybody else get hit with a stick, though, and enjoy that process. But I'll turn it back over to you. I just want people to think, dude, I want to go to Africa and get hit with people who have been hitting people for thousands of years with sticks.
Yeah, I think that's going to be new because I think we spoke about it a few minutes ago. It's not just the tribes indigenous to South Africa, but because we've got a large African community from all the other countries settling here. We've got people from Congo, we've got people from Senegal, Somalia has a large contingent here, Nigeria has a large contingent, right. People from Angola, Ghana. So. What is cool is if you visit South Africa, you essentially turn this into an African trip because you could actually then fight those, and mingle with the Congolese and the Ghanaians and that would be something awesome. Where we train at Mustang, that entire area is Congolese.
Right.
So those guys who want to grapple, want to wrestle, BJJ, whatever, and of course the stick fighting. You can actually pick, which culture you want to indulge in. So that's going to be awesome.
One of the other things that I think is cool is that those guys that are training there, like Africa has its own version of the UFC, right? It's called the EFC. And I got to meet a lot of those guys when I went out there to train. And the primary difference that I saw between the culture of what we do here and what you guys are doing out there in South Africa to meet these Congolese and to meet all these tribes that come in is these guys literally are sitting there dealing with things like, afternoon to you too, Mitch. Good to see you. So what they're dealing with is they showed me their stab marks where they've been stabbed in South Africa. Can we talk a little bit about the reality of why it's so important to understand things? And we'll get to this, and this is probably a good segue because they're going to be training Piper with you, and they're going to be studying the Piper knife system, and we're going to be doing a decent amount of training on that. Can we talk a little bit about those knives? Because I saw one of the interviews that you did that you ran with I think it was Virgil. And he was talking about the different knives that they use inside of criminal behavior and in the criminal acts and some of the stuff that he's had to deal with. So let's just talk a little bit about the Piper that you're going to be teaching everybody on this trip to South Africa when we get out there. And for the record, it's May 24th through June 1st. We have a special rate for our students. If people want to join us from outside, that's fine, but they have to interview us with us first so we can make sure that we're not taking somebody dangerous with us to South Africa. I mean, granted, it's South Africa, it's already dangerous, but we may leave you there. So can we talk a little bit about the Piper knife system and what you're going to be doing with that?
Well, I think the first thing that we're going to try to learn from this trip is to figure out exactly what conditions would lead people to use the blade in such a violent way. I think that's the first thing. I think that's what you experienced last year.
Absolutely.
Showing you the techniques is one thing.
Right.
But to actually show you the type of desperation, type of mentality that would actually pick up, a knife and repeatedly stab somebody in a very violent way. So
it's hard to understand here in the U.S. because we don't have the type of crime you have. Right. So when I go over there and I start looking at what's happening, and this is why I wanted to go to South Africa, because when you think of something in terminology, it's almost like telling somebody a joke in Spanish, right? You try to tell it to them, but when it converts over, there's certain cultural things that don't get transferred, so the joke's no longer funny. Any kind of martial arts or any defense system at all doesn't really make sense until you go to the culture and see where it's coming from, right? And going to South Africa and seeing how little human life means in certain areas of South Africa, from the Shanti towns when we rode with the tactical response teams and we were doing that whole because there's that land incursion that was going on. The fact that they threw a Molotov cocktail at us, and they would stand behind the houses and just lob these things over. So you've got a whole line of houses, and then you have the police cars and all their caravans, and you have the other stuff going on. The people will run behind the houses and lob these Molotov cocktails over, and then you're sitting there and you're just trying to stay aware. You're trying to keep yourself from getting injured. It's a dangerous environment. So being bred out of, it kind of reminds me of the Batman movie where he says, "You trained for the darkness, but I was born in the darkness." And he's sitting there talking to Bane. That's kind of where the Piper system came from. It was for people to be able to survive and basically be able to protect themselves at any level, being out there. And then dealing with that, and you're seriously, you're seeing people that'll walk up and stab you just for a Klondike bar, So, and they'll actually stab you just to stab you, let alone a Klondike bar. That's just a perk. They just wanted to eat that, So this system's coming out of a place that was originally dark, and for you to be able to take it, harness it, teach people how to use it in a productive way to protect themselves, and teach women who might be jogging late at night or, which they really shouldn't be doing, but, if they are going to do that, then they have a way of protecting themselves and having an equalizer. What was the primary concept behind you taking this system and bringing it out to the public?
Well, I didn't want to get mugged anymore.
Oh, hey, that's
that
pretty
had
good.
To just stop. That had to just stop. First of all, flat out, that was getting old. Mm-hmm. So, I just realized enough is enough. I can't be, you just, with all the martial arts I was studying, and I came from Aikido and a kickboxing and Taekwondo background. So, right. Those were very formalized martial arts. That these guys were, because everybody was teaching this kind of thing, in the martial arts, they imported the bad guy, that's part of the martial arts. Right. And I realized that, something was up because our martial artists our attackers were moving in a very rhythmic African way. Mm-hmm. And I realized that the only way to beat this was to actually step out of the martial arts and back into the culture. and then realize that your desperation, if you are hungry, if you haven't eaten in 2 days, what that does to your mind, which means me, shoving a sharpened object that doesn't have to be a knife
it's
into
not really
your
a knife
flesh.
system, right?
Yeah, it doesn't.
I'm sorry, can you still hear me? You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't have to be a knife system, right? It's a stabbing system. So
it's a stabbing system.
Right. So if you're sitting down and you're in a position where somebody's coming after you, right, and you haven't eaten for 2 days, you're going to be thinking differently. You don't care if that's a knife. You don't care if it's, what is the tree you guys have out there with the crazy spikes, because they think they use those as in the crucifixion towards Christ. It's like the Christ tree or something.
Yeah, they call it the Christ thorn, which is a very, just hang on, I actually have one of these over here.
When he grabs this and brings it back, guys, it's going to blow your mind, because it's like, you would think of a thorn as like a rosebush thorn. Look at this thing.
Yeah, so these are what the Christ thorn looks like, and this is still the small ones. Apparently somebody decided to plant these trees throughout South Africa, but they thrive in dry, arid conditions, and for some reason this is found in Cape Town. So the Christ thorn tree it's a very sturdy thorn, so you can kind of wrap some tape around it, and you could actually just poke out the eyes. You can actually get to the carotid. So this is what it looks like. This is what the Christ thorn looks like.
Give me a second. I'm going to put you back on the screen here, so everybody can see you.
So even the vegetation will kill you.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on one moment here. I don't know why this is giving us so many issues today. Yeah, check that out. That's insane.
Yeah, so this is the Christ thorn, and this is still a little sapling. So I've actually had this in my cupboard for about 5 years, and it hasn't changed in structure. It just got so in other words, if it's nice and dry, then because what you do, you'd stab somebody and just break it off. So
and obviously something of that nature isn't going to kill somebody, but it's definitely going to mess up your head, right? But you stab them with a pin, or you stab them with an ice pick or something like that, then you have a different scenario. And then you see situations that come out of Mexico as well as out of Africa with this concept of urban camouflage. The students are going to learn a little bit about urban camouflage. Can you talk about urban camouflage a little bit and what it is?
Well, urban camouflage has got nothing to do with the way you dress.
Right. I think a lot of people think it is.
Yeah. So it's your posture, and it's about how comfortable you are in your environment. So those are like the number one things you're going to learn. That was one thing that stood out for you when you were here, is that people could tell based on your posture and just how your head is on a swivel that you weren't comfortable in that space. Mm-hmm. So urban camouflage is basically taking the person into an environment, and then once you're in the environment, your activity will determine exactly what if you belong there or not, and how you blend.
And it also deals with them hiding weapons, right? Some of them will hide weapons inside of paper, and then you think it's a piece of paper, and they'll stab you as they walk by. Some of them are hiding weapons in bags, and you think they're just shuffling for their groceries or whatever, and they'll actually try and stab you. Obviously, that's not a good day, right? So let's jump into a few of the other topics. I know we're going to have armed bodyguards with us throughout this trip. Who are the armed bodyguards, and why is it important that we have them with us?
Well, first of all, those are going to be Piper Guardians that are bodyguards. That's what they do for a living. Even our driver is going to be a Piper Guardian. So even the people that because that has always been my belief that if you're going to get somebody to take you around Cape Town, who best to have than a Piper Guardian that's trained in the system, that understands the dialect, understands the endemics, knows how the people move, and can see those early warning triggers a mile away. So, they'll be armed. They'll have firearms. So, that's always a good thing. So there'll be two, with us in the shuttle at any time. They will be the guides. They'll know which areas to go to, when to go to those areas, because we're in the middle of a drug war at the moment. So we have the, every day somebody gets shot. But I mean, that's a normal thing that, that's not even anything to write home about. But I think, Michael, the most important thing is about this trip is to let people see what mindset it will take to actually shove a sharpened object into another human's flesh repeatedly. And what I'm saying is, what is the reason? Because you sitting there, I'm sitting over here, and we always thinking from a combative perspective. Like, I want to fight you, you want to fight me. These people are hungry, they are starving. I mean, you never went to martial arts dojo and you were starving, and you don't have money, you don't know where you're going to sleep tonight. And I imagine you put somebody like that on the dojo floor. What damage can that person do? If you told somebody that was starving, it's like, you need to take that black belt, break his legs, steal his kidneys, just so that you can eat tonight. So that is.
They're going to have a much higher level of conviction.
Yeah, that's going to be easy.
Yeah.
They're not going to care.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is the thing people need to. It's going to take a while for people to get used to or get over that issue.
Yeah.
So showing the knife techniques and the fact that our plants are also carrying weapons.
And it's weird because it's the most beautiful place I've ever been. And I've been to a lot of places. I mean, I've been to Dubai, I've been to Taiwan, I've been to Canada, I've been to Japan, and Japan's also one of the most beautiful places I've been. I mean, there's so many beautiful countries, but Africa's unique in that there's like this, it's like the motherland, right? It's so gorgeous, but there's so many things there that are willing to kill you. So you just need to be careful. Now, our students will be safe while they're there. Obviously, there's going to be you, there's going to be me, there's going to be the other guardians protecting them and making sure they're good to go. I want to talk about the Cape Flats tour. So they're getting this full African experience, but now we're also going to do a Cape Flats tour. What's the point of that? Why are we looking at that?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand the hometown of where this thing comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the level of poverty people face every day, which is not going to be unique in that sense that a ghetto is a ghetto. But to understand that a martial art like this, or what we call a martial art, or this killing method, is still being used every day in those areas we're going to. So the idea is that, like the rules are in Jurassic Park, stay inside the Jeep. Okay? So it's not one of those where you get out and you can pick the gangster and the brontosaurus. It's not one of those. We're going to be driving through the areas. We're not going to be stopping to take photos or selfies. Like I said, you have to respect the area, respect the environment, because it's volatile, but you'll be safe. So I think, just driving through, seeing the roads and just observing people. I mean, we won't take them to the places you went to when you were doing, I think you were with the tactical units.
I was with the tactical units, and we actually got out of the vehicle and talked to some of the numbers gangs, which was an interesting experience. And you could tell the only reason they were behaving is that we had like 12 dudes with us that were heavily armed. And he said, "Hey, if we weren't here with you, this guy would try and stab and kill you." And I'm like, "Oh, that's fantastic." But it was very unique, because they were doing these incursions, right? And we're dealing with these different scenarios where the people have built their houses illegally on the lands and they're trying to move them off. Obviously, the people get pretty upset about it. And a lot of people think martial arts, and I think that's one of the reasons that South Africa has such a powerful stance when it comes to any kind of stabbing arts or edge weapons arts, etc. We think martial arts, we think a very dualistic aspect, right? Like, you didn't like me and I don't like you and we've agreed to have this fight. Very different world when you have 600 people coming after you, right? And when we went out there, they had, I would say, probably close to 80 to 120 officers, or different police vehicles. There was like an armored tank. I mean, it was insane. It was cool, And we go out there, but the people will block off the roads. They'll start burning the tires. They'll start trying to go after you, and you just it's a totally different game. It's not a game of you doing your 18 move combo. It's like one shot, one kill, because you don't have time for that. These people are coming after you. They're coming after you quick, and it's like a herd of dogs coming at you. There's even parts on the street, and I think it was it David that I was driving with that did the interview about them tossing the bricks over the bridge and the signs that say "Don't ever stop in these areas," because they'll toss a brick over the bridge and try and get it to break your windshield so that you'll pull over to the side of the road, and then 20 guys will come out and try and kill you and take the car. Right? It doesn't matter if you're a cop, if you're a civilian, whatever. So it's a very different environment. And I think that's the environment that anybody who claims to be a truth seeker, a realist that wants to actually see how this stuff works, that's where you should go. There's a very big difference between martial arts in the United States and martial arts in places like South Africa or Israel or any place where the people are actually trying to kill you, right? Like here they do it for fun. Out there they do it for necessity, right? And we see more and more of the reality-based arts turning into martial arts, and we don't see a lot of people that are willing to take it to that level. I know all of my students are super excited to go out and experience this. So the final thing that I want to talk about that we were kind of looking at a minute ago, just give me 1 second. I want to look at our screen here that we have. We're talking about the prison tour. And that's optional, and there's a reason that that is optional. Tell us a little bit about the prison tour, Nigel.
Well, we are looking at, I don't know how many people is going to be going, but I think with my father-in-law, we will be visiting the awaiting trial prisoners. And those guys will be waiting trials for the last year to 6 years. So they'll be in jail for 6 years awaiting trial. So I think we'll be visiting that facility.
Why is it so long? Why does it take so long for them to experience their due process? And again, another concept that is foreign to us here, because out there, it's a different world, right? Here you have to have a fast due process. Out in South Africa, if you're sitting in jail, you'll be sitting in jail for 6 years awaiting trial. That sucks, right? So tell me more about that. Why is that set up that way?
Well, there's a lot of crime. You don't have enough evidence. The guy, and of course there's new crimes. People are going back to jail because they're repeat offenders. We just don't, we're looking at a backlog of, again, so many years. Mm-hmm. Certain crimes take precedent over others. I mean, if you can't afford a defense attorney, then you can imagine what's going to happen to you. You get kicked, all the way down. So, it's a sad thing, but you've seen just how weird those prison officials are and what type of mindset they have. Mm-hmm. They are not as I think the prison systems in the US are a lot different.
Oh, they're hugely different.
The wardens.
Yeah.
Now the wardens there, these guys are prepared for certain things. But I mean, you've visited Baltimore, and you could see these guys are just there to keep the prison population calm. I think that's the most important thing.
I think there's a reason for that. How many prisoners were in there compared to, like, we have issues with overcrowding here in the U.S., but not like at Poolsmore. I think how many prisoners are in there per guard? They're there to keep that.
You get a cell, the typical cell that's supposed to hold like four to eight prisoners. You'll hold like 30. So there'll be 30 people. And you know what it looks like? It looks like that scene in Guardians of the Galaxy when they were in this jail, the space jail, and they're all lying on top of each other. That's what it looks like.
Right.
I think that's why me and my wife, we make fun of that scene because that's what it looks like. Because when they're kind of spooning and all that.
Well, and when I went out there, it was so weird because I'm walking around. I think they said there was something like 13,000 inmates inside of the prison. And I said, okay, well, how many COs are there? How many guards are there? And I think there was something like 500, 600, right? So I'm like, wow, those are really not good. That's kind of a huge delineation. And I don't know if that number was exact or, if that's confidential, and that's why they didn't tell me the real number. But the reality is that you could tell that there was, like all prisons anywhere in the world, it's disproportionate. And I'm looking forward to, taking the students there that want to see that. I went there by myself. It was funny. Mr. King was telling me the other day, he said, I would never go to South Africa without you and a whole bunch of people. And that's exactly why I'm doing it, because I think a lot of people won't. And I said, well, I went by myself. And he goes, yeah, but you're a different breed, And so I was like, you got to live life. And that's why we study what we study in defense, right? The whole reason we study in defense is it should work in real time. I don't like, and and I call these guys like the poser martial artists, right? They sit down and they're like, I have a black belt and you should worship me. I'm like, okay, a couple of things here. Number one, I only worship God. Number two, the people that sit down and think that they're going to pull a resume out before somebody tries to kill them, it's not going to happen, right? So we got to get to that. We got to get to that point where our stuff just works, whether the guy believes in it or not. If our attacker believes in our system or doesn't believe in our system, it shouldn't matter. It should still work. You know, it's kind of one of those things where the guy looks at you and goes, "I'm not afraid of you," and you're like, "Yeah, that has no relevance on whether or not I can break your body." You know, and that's why I think the South African trip, the South African experience, is so important. Now, we're not just going to be interacting with the Zulu guys. You said we're going to be working with multiple tribes, right?
Yeah, I think that's actually a much better approach, because let's say you wanted to go visit different African countries, and in Africa we have 54 different countries. Mm-hmm. So having them all in one city would work out a lot easier, because now you get to experience, because here's the thing, they bring their culture with them, like in the States.
Yeah.
And I always tell people South Africa is the United States of America for Africa. We would represent the US in terms of diversity, where everybody comes into our country to make a better life for themselves. You see, that's generally how it works. We don't go to their countries; they basically come to ours. And that's not me throwing any disparaging remarks on the other countries. We're just saying that this is just how different it is.
Just a fact.
It's just a fact, So, and I mean, you've seen some of the churches that were along Voortrekker Road. Mm-hmm. I think on Sunday mornings, I think you just walked into one of these churches and you could see this was a man that I think he was from Nigeria, or even the ministers that you have here, the religious ministers, they come with their whatever,
with their culture.
The whole culture comes,
Yeah.
And so and again, you're going to be exposed to how they've adapted to the criminal culture in South Africa, how they've formed their own little niche within the criminal element. So you'll start seeing Congolese guys having to deal with the local gangs and how they deal with the local gangs. But again, we don't use firearms that much because knives are just the preferred weapon, and just how quick these things can happen. I mean, you saw with your first night in Cape Town, just go down the wrong road, and suddenly, it's straight out of a horror movie, and you're like, there was no build up to it.
Right. Well, and for those of you that don't know, and it's kind of a funny story, but it's kind of not a funny story, but the first night I get in, Nigel's like, "Hey, meet me down here at this place called, what was it? Spur. Great food, delicious food." He's like, "Meet me down here. We're going to eat down here." Well, Siri takes me to the freaking back restaurant, and apparently that is a place where certain things happen. I drive back there. This car comes in, and like 4 dudes jump out of the car. And I'm like, "Nigel, I think I'm in the wrong place." He's like, "Lock the doors, freaking don't get out of the car." And as I start driving backwards to get out of there, one of the guys got in the way, and it was kind of like, "Hey, if you got to run him over, because you need to get out of there quickly." And I'm like, I see how this is. The first night I meet Nigel, I think he's trying to kill me. So we ended up having a great dinner. He's like, "Yeah, don't ever park back there. Park over here, and stay away from this." The other thing I thought was kind of interesting, the restaurants in South Africa, you walk in and there's no silverware on the tables, specifically knives, right? And I asked the people why that they don't have any of the silverware on the tables, and they said because people will come in and try and steal it, or they will try to take it and stab you with it. So they don't bring you any silverware until you actually get your food. And I thought, well, that's... it was so interesting, because if you have a mind that's alert and aware and you're paying attention to things, you'll fit great into South Africa. And if you're alert and you're paying attention, then you'll feel fine. But, for me being over there, I felt like I fit right in. But if you're not paying attention and you're messing around on your phone, you're going to get jacked real quick, because there's so many people that have a level of poverty that I think is just hard to understand here in the United States, and I've never seen anything like that until I went to South Africa. When we see people on the side of the road and the side of the streets, and they're begging, and they're on their iPhone, and they're overweight, and they're like, "Yeah, life is hard." Well, apparently it's not that hard, because we're the country that has overweight homeless people. Whereas in your country, you have people who can touch their spine through their stomach, right? And they're the ones that are homeless. They're the ones that are begging, and they're sitting down. I remember I was walking along Hoop Bay or Betty Bay. It was the one without the penguins, and I'm walking down there, and these kids start following me, right? And there's like 4 or 5 of them. And they're running along, and I'm like, these kids are scoping me out. At first you're like, little African kids, what's up, dude? But they're checking me out because they're planning on how to jack something from you. So what I did is I just stopped it right then. I went right up to them and I said, listen, guys, what's going on? What can I do for you? And the guys all, we want some American money. And I'm like, yeah, well, freaking get in line. Everybody wants some American money, And, but I said, okay, no problem. And I gave it to one kid. I said, I'm going to give you guys $5 and I want you to share it so you can all get food. And this one kid took it and jammed out. And the other 2 kids started chasing him. They got pissed, right? And then they came back and they're like, he took it. He's not going to give us any. Can we have some more? I was like, oh my goodness. It is such a weird concept. Like you don't see that stuff here in the U.S.
So here's the other thing regarding currency. To any American that visits South Africa for the first time, you have to exchange your dollars for South African currency because no store, in the country is gonna
take your money.
Yeah, nobody. You have to be authorized by the Reserve Bank, which is our version of the Fed. That's how high up you need to go. So.
Well, and I remember that from when I was trying to pay you. It was like an act of Congress to give you money. We had to go sit there for how long? 3 hours?
Remember, we were in this locked room that had no air conditioning. It was like a safe.
Right.
We walked into the safe, and there were these guys that was kind of funky. And, there was no deodorant.
And then we got locked in this room for half an hour while we were waiting to try and get the money. And there's like a glass little teller stand there that's like bulletproof, and you can't freaking get out. And I was like, dude, I just want to pay my instructor for the training he gave me for the week. And they're like, please hold, right? And they put us in. How big was that room? Like 3 by 3. It was ridiculous.
It was just big enough for the 2 of us. And I mean that's how difficult it is. So if you guys enter the country, make sure that you either have the currency before you land or go to foreign exchange as soon as you get off the plane. That's going to help you a lot.
Yeah.
If you want to use your credit card and whatever. The other thing about South Africa is our banks are very secure. Our banks are very, very secure. You are not allowed to trade money with these like PayPal and those things are not really popular here because the banks control everything. So if you want to send money to anybody, the banks have
they've got that on lockdown.
Yeah. So in 2008 when we had that recession, South Africa wasn't really hit because our banks prepared, for this global, I would say, depression, if you want to put it that way.
Right.
So that's why the best advice I can give you is that we've got a lot of corruption and poverty and those things, but when it comes to the banking system, it's on point.
Oh yeah.
You could see just for foreign exchange, they lock you in the room with your money.
Well, Nigel, thank you for your time today. For those of you watching, I'm going to do another live feed. I'm going out to Ecuador tomorrow to go train some law enforcement and military out there, and I'm going to do another live feed, God willing, next Friday, and I might even pull Nigel back on for that live feed so that you guys can experience some of the people out there. We have figured out majority of our technical difficulties that we had today. That was freaking ridiculous, but we got it figured out, and we look forward to seeing you guys then. And Nigel, I'll give you a call in just a few minutes here. Guys, thanks so much for staying tuned. We look forward to seeing you next week, Friday.